Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Rosson, and as Vice President of the DESERA Group, I'd like to thank you for joining DESERA Group's webinar today. Our topic is an overview of the changes of ISO 9001-2015, which continues our key concept series on the significant aspects of the new version. This will be a basic overview of the changes, as well as some guidance for transition based on our experience since the standard was released. My intent is to pull out the most important information so you know where to focus your attention. And then when you get into an actual training program or into a study group, then you can hone in right in on the details you want to use. In a minute, we'll get into the content for today, but first I'd like to tell you a little bit about DESERA. DESERA is a consulting company that started back in 2008 to work with companies who want to improve their effectiveness and efficiency. Typically, we use standards like ISO 9001 as a foundation, and in particular, we're experts and contributing authors to TL 9000. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work with companies who have grown by acquisition, who have very complex processes around the globe that need to talk to each other to avoid making big, expensive mistakes. This year, we're spending a lot of time supporting companies who are transitioning to the new version of ISO 9001 or who are starting to use the standard for the first time. Because we're consultants rather than certification body auditors, we can completely tailor all our training and our internal audits to actually help you solve problems, build your own skills, and meet your goals. We help clients who are wanting to use the new version in this transition period to do some house cleaning and upgrade their quality management systems while they have the organization's attention. And we're helping them not only decide what to do, but to get it done more efficiently. We do these webinars as an introduction to our services, and we're enjoying getting in touch with people who are becoming familiar with DESERA through these events. I hope you'll get in touch with me if we can help you out in any way, large or small. I'm always welcome to answer questions via email or the telephone. But for example, you can bring in our webinars as a series or as individual items for your own organization, like in a series of weekly meetings where we can guide your team's studies to truly understand what the standard means. I should introduce myself. I'm Karen Rosson, as I said, Vice President of DESERA. And after 20 years in industry where I worked both in line and staff roles in manufacturing and service, I became a consultant in 2005 and started DESERA in 2008 with my partner Dave Santacola. We are both active in creating standards, and as I said, we train and consult with companies to get the most out of using standards. And now on to the presentation, ISO 9001-2015, an overview of the changes. The agenda for today is to talk about three key items. First of all, why the standard changed. Because if you're on this call, you may have a significant role in promoting the need for change in your organization. So you need to know a little bit of the background. Second, we'll talk about what changed. We're going to talk about what changed on the surface level that's not so important, but you need to know about. And then the deep dive changes, those things that really will cause you to look at your system and do some things differently if you're not already using those concepts. And the third topic is making the transition, how to get ready to work with your certification body and what your auditors will be expecting. Let's get started with why did ISO 9001 change? Well, ISO 9000 has actually evolved since its inception back in 1987. In 1987, the standard was released on the world and revised slightly in 1994. No big changes. The main clauses stayed the same. There were 20 clauses, and they focused particularly on how you built product, designed and manufactured product. Specifically, it seemed most relevant to. Many clauses gave very prescriptive requirements and requirements for documented procedures and records and so forth. And then the standard was revised in 2000 and a small revision in 2008 to become more process-based. The folks who wrote the standard listened to the users who said, This needs to focus more on how we actually do business. We don't do business by these 20 clauses. We do business by having processes for manufacturing, for service, for design, for purchasing. And ISO heard that and responded, revise the standard to look at continual improvement, to look at focusing on the customer. 8 quality management principles were introduced at that time, and those continue to be part of the 2015 revision. This revision, we can say, instead of being product-based or process-based, it's now performance-based. It ties the requirements of the standard into the success of the business's strategy and overall objectives, and requires leadership to be more involved than ever before. Now, the standard seems to be revised every 13 to 15 years or so. You can expect that we'll still be living with this version of ISO 9001 for at least another 7 years, until they're likely to do a dot revision and then a big revision maybe in another 15 years. Think where you might be in your career. So this is a standard that we can really grow with over the years. Why did ISO 9001 change? Well, there are several reasons, and I want to point these out that you can use. In fact, you may want to take a screenshot of this when the slide is complete, because these are things you can work into your communications with your organization on why is the standard changing now? Why do you have to go through a transition audit or make changes when it's time for your recertification? Well, some of the feedback that the users of ISO 9001 have been giving over the years is there's too much of an emphasis on documentation. Instead, there should be more of a focus on improvement. And it shouldn't be quality management system for the sake of having documents and records, but the management system needs to be built into part of the business strategy, just like the financial management system is built into the business strategy. Now, the process approach was introduced in the 2000 version of ISO 9001, but it wasn't truly required to be driven from the top down. This version really requires the use of the process approach, starting at the top. Preventive action is still actually included. We want to prevent problems from happening, but they've changed the language to call it risk-based thinking, because too many people looked at the standard in the past and said, well, isn't everything we're doing here about preventing problems? So they've introduced a new term called risk-based thinking that strengthens that tie to the business. The standard emphasizes performance, that the measurements that you use need to truly add value to the business. And finally, the new standard has a numbering scheme that aligns with other standards, other ISO management system standards, all based on a particular document called Annex SL, which says you'll use these terms and this numbering. And Annex SL is just the number of the standard. Like they started with Rev A, Rev B, Rev C. They got on to AA, AB, AC, BA, BB, BC, and so on. And now they're up to SL. So the ISO folks have been annexing a lot of things to their standards over the years. And this is just the latest one that says from now on, we're going to have a coordinated numbering system for our management systems. Okay, let's start digging into not why the change, but what changed in ISO 9001. Well, let's start with what didn't change. It's easier to start with, gee, we've made a lot of changes, but you still get to keep a lot of the good stuff that's working. When I describe to someone what ISO 9001 is all about, the intent has always been to specify the requirements for a quality management system when the organization wants to show it can consistently provide products and services that meet requirements. Well, that's a lot of words that sounds like quality speak, so let's break it down into something that everyone can understand. I explained to my mom what I do by saying to her, Mom, it's just like how you turn out a quality cake every time. You start with a great recipe, and then you follow it. You bake it according to that recipe, and then at the end, it's got to taste good. If you don't like the way it tastes, you go back and you look at either we didn't have a very good recipe, or we didn't follow what it said, and you continually improve and tweak that recipe until you get it just the way you want it. Another thing that didn't change in ISO 9001, besides the basic intent, was the 7 underlying quality management principles. They're the foundation of the standard. And well, it changed a little bit because in 2000 they had 8 quality management principles. In this version, they've rolled the system approach along with the process approach and called that principle number 4. I always thought that made a lot of sense, and I guess a lot of the authors thought so too, because now we're down to 7 management principles, and these are outlined in the standard ISO 9000. It's the companion document that gives all the underlying principles and the definitions that are used in ISO 9001. So ISO 9001, if you've used the standard over the years, you recognize it has a customer focus. You need to understand what the customer wants. You need to fulfill their needs. You need to be sure that you're listening to their feedback. That's still in the standard. The focus on leadership. Used to talk about management more in the standard. Now they've changed the language to say, we're talking about leadership. This is how the organization is led from the very top. And you'll see the principles of how the organization is being led flow through all the clauses of ISO 9001. Now, engagement of people. You probably, when you think engagement of people, you think of old clause 6.2 that talked about making sure your people are trained. But throughout ISO 9001, everything that it's asking everybody to be pulling on the same end of the rope to get the quality results, that's what it's talking about, engagement of people. This is the bring the brain to work principle. I mentioned process approach. They hit it very hard in this standard, showing that all the processes have to work together. We'll dig into that one a little bit more in this presentation. Improvement has been an underlying principle of standards since 2000. You think of continual improvement with corrective action, with continual improvement programs and Kaizen and all those kinds of things that we've been using over the years. Well, those are embedded in many of the clauses of ISO 9001. And then, of course, you have to keep documents and records. Why? So management can make better decisions. So users of the system can see what they're doing and make corrections as they go to stay in alignment with requirements. And finally, relationship management. That principle is hit harder in this version of the standard than in any of the previous ones because it talks about understanding the needs of your internal and external interested parties. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in this presentation because that's a very important change that your auditors will be looking at. Do you understand, and do we see evidence of using the management principle of relationship management throughout your system? Okay, those are the things that didn't change, the basic intent and the 7 underlying principles. But now let's look at what did change. The things that made all the press that you might have read about in magazines or seen in the basic overview presentations, I'm going to hit those really quickly here, just so we've got them out there in the open. Yeah, these are the attention grabbers. Everyone knows these things changed if they've at least cracked the spine of the standard or attended a webinar or a lecture. We all know there are now 10 clauses instead of 8. That's the Annex SL part. They've changed some terminology, like they say documented information instead of documents and records. They say you don't have to have a management representative anymore, but the same results are required regardless of what the title of the person or people doing the work is. They just don't have that prescriptive requirement in the standard that says you have to have a management representative. There used to be a requirement for a quality manual, and it had to include some specific items. ISO 9001 doesn't say now that you have to have a quality manual, but as we go through this presentation, you'll see some places where writing down some decisions that you've made, some ways of working, some information that you've gathered and decided upon might make sense to put it in something that looks suspiciously like a quality manual, but you can do it in the format and use the content that suits your organization. In the past, there were 6 specific documented procedures that were required. There are no longer any specific procedures called out, but you're not off the hook because in multiple places, particularly clause 4.4 and 751, there and many other places where it implies that you will write down what it is you're doing, how you're doing it, so that it's consistently applied throughout the organization over a long period of time. Now, you notice I just called out some clauses. It's a good idea if you have a standard, get it out and open it up as we go through the standard because I'm not going to be doing a lot of quoting from it, but you may want to look down and reference your copy. Some terminology in ISO 9001 changed. You need to know these. They're the language of our standard that we'll be using over the next 10 or 15 years, but they'll become very natural. They're not a huge impact. I'll give you a little reason for why they changed. Products. Now they say products and services because the standard has applied to products and services all along, but now they make that explicit. The standard used to talk about suppliers. Now they use the term external provider. And the last one in that section says purchase product. Now they talk about externally provided products and services. What they're getting at there is that don't think of suppliers only as people that you have a purchase order with who provide parts that you incorporate into your product. Think instead in terms of external providers, those entities that give inputs to your organization that are used to produce what it is you make for your customers or that you use internally to your organization. For example, you have certainly parts suppliers if you're building a product, but you may have external service providers. You may outsource some production to an outside entity or parts of your production process. Those would be external providers. Or you may have parts of your quality management system, for example, things related to training, may be provided by a centralized corporate training department. Even though they're under the same corporate umbrella, they're not part of your quality management system and that you don't control them or their objectives, and therefore you would count them as an external provider. So the standard makes that clear with changing they intend to make that more clear to everyone by changing the language and not just say supplier, but broaden it. Documented information, no big change there. Work environment changed to more words, more pages, environment for the operation of processes. You can call these things whatever you want. You do not have to use ISO 9001's terminology. It's just you'll be hearing it now. They used to talk about a management representative. That term is gone. Now they use leadership in general. All of leadership is responsible for certain outcomes. Preventive action is no longer used in the standard. Instead, we're using the term risk in many places throughout the standard. Let's see, I talked about documented procedures in quality manual. Exclusions, the standard used to have a reference to exclusions. You could exclude parts of the standard from your certification if you weren't required to do them because no customers required them and your organization just simply didn't do them for very good reasons, had to justify them. You still have to justify any exclusions. They just don't use the word and they're not limited to any particular clause. So those terms, those don't make a huge impact on what you do. We'll get into what makes a big impact in a minute. Now, many people are concerned about the numbering system. Let me just give you a quick, rough correlation to what's there. There were 8 clauses, there are now 10. So clause 4 on the quality management system. In new ISO, the stuff about documented procedures and stuff moved to clause 7. There are some new requirements in clause 4. Clause 5, management responsibility, now is broken up into 2 clauses, one for leadership and one for planning. So old clause 5 transitioned to new clause 5 and 6, primarily, though there's a little bit that moved into clause 9. Let's see, resource management was about training and the work environment itself. Now that's all included under support, clause 7. Product realization, that was about how you build products and service customers. The stuff having to do with purchasing and design and manufacturing. Now, all of that is included in operation. An old clause 8 on measurement, analysis, and improvement, where it talked about corrective action and internal audits, all that is now moved over into clauses 9 and 10, except a little bit of it is stuck in clause 8 because it has to do with how you evaluate your products as you're building them and process measurement and so forth. So maybe those numbers don't make sense when I lay them out just like that, but ISO itself, through the committee that wrote the standard, has provided a correlation matrix. And there's a link to it right there, and you'll also receive that as a handout to this presentation. ISO has also included documented information guidance, which is their way of saying, well, what do you have to do with all this renumbering? I'll give you a little bit of rundown on what's in that documented information guidance. There's the link to it. There's a page that has same link as before. There are a lot of helpful documents on that page. And I'll give you a quote of what the documented information guidance document says, what that guidance document says. It says, if you're already using ISO 9001-2008, you shouldn't need to rewrite your documentation. They say it's particularly true if you've already structured your management system based on the way you operate using a process approach, which implies that if your documentation is numbered according to the clauses of ISO 9001, maybe you might want to renumber or something. You may not need to rewrite it, but you might need some kind of correlation matrix internally, or you may want to retitle your documents. And it says your organization may be able to carry out some simplification and or consolidation of existing documented information in order to simplify its QMS. That's where DESERA is working with organizations to go through and not do an overhaul. If it's working well, you don't want to throw everything up in the air and see where it lands, but you may be able to go through and say, do we have stuff in here that's not relevant anymore? We need to do some spring cleaning on. We need to combine or simplify our documents. Now is a good time to do that. But the new standard does not require that you renumber everything to meet their numbering system. Of course, if your quality management system is written according to the old numbering, you might want to rethink how you have written and how you use that quality manual itself. So that's the guidance for if you're already using ISO 9001, if you're already certified. But if you're new to ISO 9001, they recommend that you emphasize the process approach. This is the way DESERA has always worked with our clients, so our clients don't have a whole lot of rewriting to do on their documentation. But what ISO says is analysis of the processes should be the driving force for defining the amount of documented information needed. And wait till you see what we have coming up. We talk about context of the organization and how that is also a driving force for defining the amount and type of documented information you need. So you can pick up those two documents at that site. I'll also provide them to you in Word format so you can read those on your own. Okay, those were the things that changed a little bit, the things that didn't change, the things that changed a little bit and don't really amount to much. And now we get into the things that really changed. You need to know and act on these different changes. When I finish this slide, it's going to be a good slide to screenshot and save, or you'll want to take some notes on what's on this one because I'm going to be firing clause numbers at you rapidly. Context of the organization. Those words have gotten a lot of press. They mean a lot, and I'll talk about them in more detail in a little while, as well as interested parties, their needs and expectations. We'll talk about that. Those are things that auditors will definitely be looking for. They're big changes. The expectations for leadership. We're going to do a deep dive into that in this presentation. There's accountability for the leadership has accountability for the effectiveness of the QMS. They need to be sure they align and integrate the quality management system with business strategy. And leadership is expected to use the process approach and use risk-based thinking. It starts at the top, and ISO makes that very clear in this standard that that's what's expected, what's expected of leadership and what auditors therefore will be looking for to verify. And the fourth big change in what really changed, and you need to know and act on, we'll be going into a little bit more detail, is risk-based thinking. Risk-based thinking is directly required or implied in at least 13 clauses in ISO 9001 2015. We'll be doing another fee-based, webinar-based learning, but it'll be for fee, for risk-based thinking, where we dive into those 13 clauses and how ISO 9001 expects you to incorporate risk-based thinking into your quality management system. But we'll talk about it a little bit today so you know what to look for. There are a bunch of additional changes that auditors will pursue, or should pursue anyway, on transition. And so you, as you go through upgrading and transitioning your management system, need to be looking at these clauses in particular and making sure that you take them into account. Another good slide for a screenshot or to take some good notes on. The process approach. They really mean it this time. Be sure you read clause 0.3 of ISO 9001. Be sure you understand the expectations of management in clause 511 and the other references to the process approach in 8.1 and 9.2. You need to understand that and be able to demonstrate internally and to your external auditors that you are using the process approach because they mean it this time. It's got some teeth. Your quality objectives, additional requirements and information there in clause 6.2 and 9.3. Those requirements are surrounding risk. They've got clauses on change in at least 4 different places where they reference change. This is new. These will be emphasized by auditors, and you need to take them into account in your management system. A little bit of changes on monitoring and measurement. Take a look at clause 715. There's a new term, organizational knowledge. It goes along with competence and awareness from old clause 6.2 about training, but organizational knowledge can be seen as looking at what do you do when somebody leaves the organization, or when you merge with another organization and you've got to communicate the way we do things around here to other people, to other leaders. How do you manage organizational knowledge? It's not particularly prescriptive at all, but it does say you have to demonstrate how you handle organizational knowledge. Communication has some changes. Design and development planning, clause 832, has some changes. External providers, I mentioned why they changed that term. Well, they've even got an appendix, appendix A.8, which deals with outsourcing. So particularly if your organization is doing any outsourcing, or if you deal with corporate entities that influence your management system, you want to be sure you take those changes into account. Control of non-conforming outputs. Remember, that used to be a required procedure. They've changed the wording on it, and it's something that you want to take a look at in your system. Management review inputs. You need to be looking at the risks and opportunities and reviewing the interested parties' needs and expectations, as well as the context of the organization. So those would be inputs to management review that you want to be sure that you take into account in your management system. And finally, nonconformity and corrective action, clause 10.2, be sure you understand those. Now's the time to take the screenshot, or be sure you have all those clauses written down, because you want to do a deep dive into all those clauses and be sure you understand them and are implementing them in your management system. So auditors will be pursuing those. Okay, I promised you we'd take a deep dive into those 4 big important parts of ISO 9001. So we'll do each one in turn. Context of the organization and interested parties. Organizations do not have, you can't just take an ISO 9001 manual and throw it in an organization and everyone's going to implement it the same way, because it depends on the structure of your organization, what you set out to do, how you fit in with your customers and your external providers. In some cases, what the expectations of the community, broader than just your customers, are on your organization. So for example, a contract manufacturer that is getting designs from many, many different customers with different expectations, maybe some different expectations on what's incorporated in their quality management system, is going to have different requirements and would apply ISO 9001 slightly differently than an OEM, somebody who controls the product from cradle to grave. Or an organization that's a small business, or one sole location or one small campus all in the same city, is going to have different communications challenges, different ways of handling objectives and competence requirements, various ways of doing their business from a global multi-site business that may be almost like having a federal government with certain rights left to the states. So if you've got a global multi-site business that maybe has 10,000, 20,000 people all under one quality management system, you're going to apply the requirements of ISO 9001 differently than if everything's all in one roof. ISO recognizes that, and recognizes that the degree of formality, the degree of records and documents and communication methods will vary according to the context of your organization. They expect you to do this. In the left-hand box, that's the quote directly out of ISO 9001. And on the right, those are just some questions you need to be able to answer. For example, what is your organization's purpose and strategic direction? It says you shall determine those. Where might you determine those? Through meetings of your leadership team, through discussions of your organization's culture and the long-term, long-range planning the organization is doing. Those things are done at the top. They need to be understood and probably written down so they're effectively communicated, though the standard doesn't say they need to be written down. You need to understand the results that your organization intends to achieve through its quality management system. Then you need to determine the relevant internal and external issues. What are the pressures from inside your organization as well as outside? Things that are changing with your corporate structure, things that are changing with the marketplace in general, things that your customers expect of you or that your competitors may be doing that affect what you do within your business. Those would all be relevant internal and external issues to your organization, changes in your management team, changes in your internal organizational structure. So you need to understand those. And then what it says finally is you need to monitor and review those issues. Where might that happen? Hint, hint, we'll talk about that when we get to management review and also the role of leadership. Clause 4.2 discusses understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Over on the left side, that's the quote out of ISO 9001. And on the right, just to talk about it, these are the things you need to do. You need to know who are the relevant interested parties. We talked about those relevant internal and external issues. Well, those issues often stem from who your interested parties are. Your customers and suppliers or external providers, of course, the corporate entity, and find out what do they require. Then it says you have to monitor information about their interests, about their requirements. Well, how do you monitor that? That's not something that everyone does in their own little office or cubicle or talks about in the break room. The way it's written here, the organization shall monitor and review information. Auditors are going to be looking for a systematic, consistent, not necessarily documented, but probably you're going to have some records of how you've done that for any organization of any size that shows that you have reviewed information and you can see trends over a period of time. Context of the organization and interested parties, those two concepts are so important because they influence your entire quality management system, and thus they influence your auditors. They'll influence what your auditors are looking for in terms of how much documentation you'll have and how is it presented. They'll be looking for how you focus on customers based on who you define as your interested parties. They'll be looking at your objectives and do they tie to your context and your interested parties, or are they just sort of generic? Auditors will definitely, as I said, be looking at how you monitor and measure your processes, your products and services. They'll be looking at how you monitor and review the changes to your context, the context of your organization and your interested parties' expectations. Those will influence the competency needs and the organizational knowledge, including how you plan for changes. They'll influence how you communicate with customers, what you say, when you say it, how you say it, who says it. Auditors should be looking at all these things. And I'm not just talking about your certification body auditors. I'm looking at how your internal auditors learn to audit at a deeper level than just asking for documents and records and prove to me that you followed this procedure. Okay, all of these items will influence audits based on the context of the organization and the interested parties. Auditors, internal and external, as well as if you're doing customer audits, you need to understand what those are so that you understand the application of the standard. Auditors will be looking for evidence throughout the entire organization and throughout all audits that regarding context of the organization. They'll be looking for not necessarily documented but defined, probably documented, probably incorporated in many different ways in your various documents and reviews and so forth. The interested parties, their requirements, they'll be looking to see that your purpose and strategic results and intended results, strategic direction and intended results are incorporated into the process measures and the product measures that you're looking at. They'll be looking primarily to see, I don't want to say primarily, but they will over the entire audit be looking at the process approach. Are you actually ensuring that results are achieved according to the processes you've established, or are you going for the diving catch? Are you relying on individuals to pull everything together at the last minute, or certain people who have all the knowledge and everyone else just kind of runs around and does what they say? Are you actually using an effective process approach where you're looking at data to make sure that you're improving and that you're addressing the risks and the opportunities? Now, ISO 9001 doesn't say you have to have a quality manual, but you can capture a lot of this stuff in something that looks suspiciously like a quality manual without listing clause by clause of ISO 9001. Here's where our procedure that demonstrates we do this is. Your quality manual can be, or some other name that you have for it, some sort of place to house how you've decided on all these things. Digging into the second big requirement that you need to be sure you're putting into place when you're transitioning to ISO 9001, let's look at leadership. Leadership is included in Clause 5 of the standard, but it permeates the entire standard. Auditors will be looking for evidence throughout the entire audit to see that those 7 quality management principles are used, especially the process approach. They'll be looking to see that you have a documented policy that reflects the purpose, context, and strategic direction, and that it's applied throughout the organization. And in Clause 5, it says leadership is responsible for doing that. You think? I mean, of course leadership does that. You cannot have a grassroots effort to decide the strategic direction of the organization or the purpose of the organization. That comes down from the top. So now what auditors will be looking for, they'll ask leaders, what did you decide? What am I supposed to be looking at out there? And then when they go out throughout their audit, they'll be looking for corroborating evidence that the rest of the organization understands a policy and understand how it affects what they're asked to do and what results they're getting and where they may need to make changes, where they may need new resources, additional resources, or moved resources. Auditors will be looking throughout all audits throughout the entire organization for demonstration that those objectives that are established by leadership are actually linked to policy, are actually affecting how people work so that the results that are being achieved tie to those objectives. They're not looking for squishy objectives like everyone has a zeal for quality. They're looking for something that shows that you can see within the results of the organization. They'll be looking for improvement because that's something that leadership is responsible for ensuring happens as part of the process approach. And where leadership may have the closest tie to customers, or the sales organization, or the people dealing with orders have a customer focus, there ought to be a line of sight throughout all of your processes to how do those processes affect your customers, because leadership is supposed to be promoting an emphasis on customers throughout the organization. Finally, risk-based thinking. It's actually the leaders who need the most information about the risks so that they can make decisions. Risks need to be surfaced to management, to the entire leadership team as they need to, so that they can make relevant decisions based on, do we want to take this risk? Or do we want to do something to mitigate against the risk, or maybe not even go in that direction because the risk is too big? So throughout processes, auditors will be looking for, is risk-based thinking actually happening, and the information flowing back and forth between management and all the processes. Now, I said that Clause 9, where management review was one of those clauses that changed. This is the critical link. It used to be in Clause 5 under management responsibility. Now they've moved it to Clause 9, and they list those management review inputs. So within 511, it says that top management has to demonstrate leadership and commitment by looking at the effectiveness of the QMS, by ensuring the integration of the quality management system requirements into the overall processes, and by ensuring that the management system achieves its intended results. Like, are we getting those, approaching those objectives that we've set for ourselves throughout the year and over a long period of time, and our trends? Well, management review is where leadership gets its opportunity to look at that for the trend lines, for the changes, for the big information that needs to be decided across processes. So Clause 9.3.2 has a change in it when it talks about management review inputs, in that it talks about what are the changes in relevant external and internal issues, those needs of our relevant interested parties. Top management also needs to be looking at the effectiveness of actions taken to address risks and opportunities. So that's new. They never actually said that the leadership, that in management review, they needed to be looking at risks and opportunities or relevant external and internal issues. Now you need to do that. The purpose is the same as what 2008 required, but now it should have more, your management review should have more of a strategic focus and an emphasis on quality performance over the long haul, looking ahead into how those risks will affect your ability to achieve goals. The third big topic in ISO 9001 that will be addressed throughout all audits, or that transition audits will definitely be looking at to be sure you have in place, is can you demonstrate that you're using the process approach, one of the underlying principles of the quality management principle that underlies ISO 9001. Well, here's a quote from ISO 9000, that guidance document that underlies ISO 9001, that says, what do we mean by the process approach? Well, it says consistent and predictable results are achieved more effectively and efficiently when activities are understood and managed as interrelated processes that function as a coherent system. In other words, don't sub-optimize just because one organization is louder than another or has a more charismatic leader. You need to understand as an organization how the results you intend to achieve come from a system of interrelated processes. Companies that are demonstrating a process approach do things like these. First of all, they have defined objectives and processes, and they know who's responsible for achieving them. They understand the capabilities and the resources that are available to them before they take action. If you're trying to achieve 100% on-time delivery and you've got parts of your processes that aren't capable of coming any place close to that, you're not going to be able to achieve that goal. That's what it's, or if you've got subcontractors that aren't able to achieve that goal, you're not going to be able to achieve it without taking some extraordinary action, like where are you putting your safety stock and how are you dealing with other constraints on the system. That's what a process approach means. You understand how you're going to get those goals and what parts of the system you need to work on to get there. You need to consider the effects of changes to a process on the system overall. That means avoid sub-optimizing. You need to manage all your processes as a system. Your auditors will be looking to be sure that people have the information that they need to make decisions and that the risks are understood and managed. So that's the guidance from ISO 9000 about what auditors will be looking for. Those are some broad theoretical statements about what does it mean to manage processes. But it all goes back to the plan, do, check, act cycle that we've been hearing about for years. And I hope most organizations who are this far along in using ISO 9001 2008 version, understood and have put into place. Now, if you take a screenshot of this, you can actually annotate it to say that the plan part of ISO 9001, where you're planning your policy objectives and resources and identifying risks, those clauses of ISO 9001 that address planning are in clauses 4, 5, 6, and I think also in big parts of 7. Clause 8, which deals with how you make your products and service your customers, is the do part. So take that purple box in the upper right-hand corner and a purple part of the circle and call that clause 8. And then clauses 9 and 10 are in the check and act, where you're monitoring and measuring your processes and looking at the results versus the plans and then taking action to improve. So check is clause 9 and act is clause 10. That's the quick and dirty. What is the process approach? How is the process approach embedded in ISO 9001? But really, there are a lot of steps. If you don't have a good process approach within your company, that it's worth learning about and being sure that you're actually using the approach, because that's what auditors are going to be looking for the next 15 years at least. Okay, we talked about the first 3 big changes to ISO 9001, context of the organization and interested parties. Then we talked about the demands on leadership. We talked about the process approach. And the 4th big change that we're going to touch on today is risk-based thinking. Remember, this is just the overview, not the detailed class. We'll have a detailed class on this coming up in the future, and I'll make sure everyone gets notified about it. So risk-based thinking is a new term in ISO 9001 2015, but it was always in there because we talked about taking preventive action in terms of planning your processes overall. That's a preventive approach. When you plan your processes and you train your people, those are all preventive actions in their own way. They're designed to keep you from making mistakes. ISO 9001 in the old version told you to analyze nonconformities and address the causes of them and prevent them from reoccurring. So it was always implied, but they called it preventive action instead of risk-based thinking. But they take it a step further now. based on your organization's mission, vision, objectives, and strategy, and the needs of your stakeholders that you've defined in Clause 4.1, or your interested parties in the internal and external issues, you're expected to determine the risks and opportunities facing your business. You're looking at risks that have to do with how you plan and implement your processes. So what happens if this outsourced provider is caught in a hurricane because I'm using somebody from down? Do I have an alternate source who's not in the hurricane zone? Or if I'm counting on 24/7 service to my customers, do I have a backup plan if I've got outages or lack of availability in the facility I intend to service them from? So those would be an example of risks in planning and implementing your processes. When you're determining your documentation, if you've got a very high-risk process, you might have a lot more documentation associated with it than something that really doesn't have that much effect on the customer or the service or the product. Also, you need to have plans to address your risks. You need to plan your actions in advance, think it through, and that's called out in Clause 6.1. A lot of detail in there, and it doesn't require a formal approach that's one size fits all. You get to decide how you do it, but Clause 6.1 talks about actions to address risks and opportunities. Now, what are those risks? Risks are anything that can affect your company's ability to meet its cost goals, because that's what customers care about a lot, right? They want it free if possible. They certainly don't want prices to go up because of your mistakes, or for them to have to eat some of the cost because of your mistakes, like in what it costs them to return a product to you or have an extra service come out and be done. So that would be a risk to the business that you want to address. The quality of your product itself, the features it includes, how well it performs once it's put into place. Speed, do you get the product there on time? Do you perform your service on time? Do you answer requests for changes or requests for service? Problems that customers have, how fast are you? Anything that could affect your ability to achieve those things will also affect your profitability. So ISO 9001, in tying the standard into the business, is saying make sure you plan your actions so that you don't affect cost, quality, speed, or profitability. Consider the issues facing the organization, consider the requirements, and that's why they tell you to continually update those, to review them as a leadership team. You need to determine what the risks and opportunities are that would keep you from meeting your goals. You need to look at how you mitigate problems, achieve gains and improvements. And then you need to plan the actions. There are different things you can do to address risks. You can avoid the risk altogether. You can eliminate the source of the risk. You can change the likelihood or consequence by putting some internal controls or ways of testing or getting around the fact that it might happen. You'll make it less likely to happen. You can share the risk with someone else, sometimes with a customer, or you can decide to take the risk. You can say, you know what, we're going to put this product to market knowing that we might have some bugs in this software, and we'll do an immediate release to fix those because you know the upside and the consequences of being first to market. ISO 9001 also expects you to look at the opportunities, and opportunities include things like using new practices in technology, or being able to respond to new customer needs or new products that are coming on the market, or new markets you can get into entirely, or the ability to participate in partnerships with other organizations. So you need to plan actions to address those risks, and you need to look at what your opportunities are up front. So this is really intensive on the process owners and the leaders of the organization. They're doing a lot of this anyway, and ISO 9001:2015 is expecting you to roll it into the quality management system, because the quality management system should be surfacing these risks and should be showing the data that shows, are we acting appropriately to handle our risks? When you implement those actions, Clause 6.1 does not require you to have a formal process. You don't have to do FMEAs on every production line, for example, or certain things for every product. They do not specify what you need to do, but you have to be able to demonstrate your compliance and your commitment to addressing risks and opportunities. You can use different methods and different levels of formality across different processes. What you do for your highest risk product is going to be very different from what you do for a low-level supporting process or something where you've got multiple levels of defense against. The general concepts under planning that are included in 6.1 are, first of all, you have to identify the risks and opportunities. Then you have to analyze the potential impact. Ideally, you do that with quantitative terms, but you may only be able to do qualitative, figure out what's best for those processes. It's not just we talked about it. They're expecting you to do some level of analysis. Doesn't say it has to be written down, strongly implies it, because you're probably going to want to do it again next year or next quarter or whenever the next planning cycle is, that you'd analyze and say, how have those risks changed? And then you want to plan your response. Like I said before, you can avoid it, you can eliminate, you can change the consequences, and then that you periodically go back and look over what risks you've identified, what opportunities you've identified, how's that working out for us, what's changed. So ISO 9001 has a lot of good concepts in there about what do you do with risk. Now, this is DeSera speaking. This is not in the standard. I'll just tell you, you can probably get away with not doing a whole lot of different stuff than you're doing if you've got some pretty good risk activities going on within your company. You can explain it away to most auditors, but I'll tell you, that's probably not the best strategy. Consider the risks and opportunities of how you address Clause 6.1 in your management system. Right now, you've got everyone's attention on upgrading the system and transitioning to ISO 9001 2015. Now is the time to focus on putting new practices into place or integrating those that are in place with the quality management system. If you don't do this, your poor planning could lead your competitors to run away from you with respect to serving your customers better, or can lead to problems in the business where you haven't thought through those changes or haven't integrated them into your natural ways of doing business. And also, doing a sloppy job of planning is a waste of time. It's a paperwork drill. It's something that certain people get together to have something to show the auditor, and we all know that's no way to use ISO 9001 to get the benefits out of it. So now is the time to really take 6.1 seriously, and you've got time. You've got until 2018 to incorporate this. Most people are taking 1 to 2 to even up to 3 years to do their transition. Focus on Clause 6.1. It's one of the most important ones in the standard. Okay, so those are the 4 big changes, and as I ran down that list of clauses that change that you want to be able to be sure that you can demonstrate that you've made the changes on, we talked about why the standard changed and what the little things were in the standard. Now let's say what's new for audits and for auditors. This is the last section of this presentation. I'm going to give you some information that DeSera has gleaned from working with multiple certification bodies, reading their materials, listening to their webinars, and dealing with them through our clients. Most organizations are planning to get their transition certification during their triennial audit. So whenever their 3-year certificate is up, they'll say, okay, now we're going to get recertified and do it to the 2015 standard. That has to be done before 2018. So if you just had your triennial audit at the beginning of 2016, you've got to make your transition before 2018 because that 2016 certificate will be invalid September 2018. Okay, you don't get to say, well, I'll do it in 2019. No, you've got to actually demonstrate that you meet ISO 9001 2015 by September 2018. So those organizations who have their triennial coming up in late 16 or 17 or the first half of 2018 are doing their transition audits mostly with their transition audit as part of their triennial. It'll add about a day onto their audit, maybe more if they're a very large, complex organization, but most CBs are saying, rough and dirty, figure about an extra day because we've got to go through some additional information, but we really will be incorporating it into our audit throughout the day, throughout our regular audit schedule. It won't look like anything that's a whole lot different. The other option you have, so for example, if you had your triennial audit right after the standard came out, maybe you've had it earlier this year, if you transition at a surveillance audit, your 3 years are still up based on the 3-year cycle that that your certificate says. So if your triennial audit was January of 2016, you'll get a new certificate when you have your surveillance audit that says, okay, you are now compliant with ISO 9001:2015, and we're going to count your certificate as valid until your 3-year anniversary since the last full system audit. So if it was January 16, you're going to have a new 3-year audit in 2019, even if you wait until late 17 to do your transition audit. Okay, so you don't get a new date on your standard. You just get they'll just reissue a standard that has the ISO 9001:2015 as the one you comply with. That keeps you from going obsolete in 2018, but it may cost a little extra because you may need a little extra time. You can have a separate special visit where an auditor comes in and just looks at the changes. That's going to cost some extra, but it's an option. It's not the most popular option, but it's one way you can go about it. Here's some additional guidance based on certification bodies and the accreditation bodies. Those are the companies that make sure certification bodies are up to snuff on doing their certification work. These are some things you need to have in place before your transition audit. Well, of course, you've got to review and update your quality management system to meet the new standard. That does not mean you need to renumber all your documents. It means you need to take into account all those changes that we covered earlier. The risk-based thinking, the process approach, the emphasis on leadership and their responsibilities and how they drive the standard into all parts of the business, into the strategic direction, and that it's fully integrated, as well as understanding the context of the organization and interested parties. So you need to, and then I gave that whole list of other clauses that have changed or have some additional nuances to them that you want to put in place. So you need to review and update your quality management system to meet the new standard before you have your transition audit. No kidding. Then you need to do a full system audit to the new standard and be sure that you've actually incorporated the changes. And then at that point, that may be where you actually upgrade your auditor skills. I wouldn't start with retraining all your auditors because they're going to forget before everything's in place. You may give them some overview, some implementation training, work with them in workshop format, but I wouldn't put them out there and say, okay, here's your full-scale ISO 9001:2015 training. Hang on to that until we're ready to do all our audits. And then also you need to do a full management review. Your certification body will expect to see that your management review, as required by Clause 9.3, covers all of the requirements of the new standard. Well, certification bodies can provide some of that training, but you need to understand that all certification bodies can do is give generic training. They cannot give you specific advice or guidance or on the application of various clauses to your situation or on how you should audit to those within your management system. That's something that DeSera does as a consultant, where we're not holding your certificate and we don't have to be objective about your certificate. We're there to help you. We can give you very specific training. And as we go through clause by clause, we talk about how does that apply to your organization and talk about what you may do next to be sure that you fully implemented that. And even work with you on how do you work with different process owners and members of the leadership team to get them to buy into changes that are needed. Now, certification bodies also are offering to do a transition pre-assessment for your organization. So if you've gone through this without any outside help and you say, well, gee, we don't know what we don't know, or did our internal auditors really get all the stuff they were supposed to audit, they can come in and do certification bodies can come in and do a transition pre-assessment for you. It's a service they'll be very happy to sell you. It'll be either your regular auditor or somebody like your regular auditor. And all they'll do is they'll come in and they'll say yes or no, you meet or don't meet, and they'll write you non-conformity statements for where you don't meet requirements. But they won't be able to give you any advice or any guidance. They won't be able to talk about how much further you might go with something to get more benefits out of it. That's something that DeSera is doing with clients, is we're going out and we're either doing those transition audits for our clients, or we're offering to coach their auditors to go through those. We do a 1-2 punch where we do an auditor training and then a lab where we walk them through doing audits and we give them feedback on their audits. Now for transition audits, now I'm outside of ISO 9000 standard. I'm outside of any formal documents that ISO has published. This is just a DSERA guidance on preparation. Really understand the new standard. Learn it, teach it to other people, discuss it among yourselves. Be sure you apply it. There's really good stuff in there. It wasn't just created based on the need to sell more standards. And as I said, don't start with audit training, but rather start with implementation workshops where people work together to understand and apply the new principles. Now, you're required to do a full system audit and a full management review. We recommend that you do at least 2 full rounds of internal audits because it helps you upgrade the skills of your internal audits. It helps them understand what their internal clients really need. They need to be listening. Your internal audits really need to listen to the needs of management. And then your management review, DSERA recommends that you do at least 2 full rounds of management reviews. We recommend that you do that first, rule of thumb, do that first full round of internal audits, have that when you think you're about 80% of the way done, and then your second full system audit when you are, that's your readiness assessment, your internal readiness assessment. And after each one of those, do a full management review where you emphasize the new expectations, where they become extra familiar with the types of interview questions they'll be getting when they work with a third-party auditor. And do not expect business as usual on your certification body auditors. They've had additional training. They're getting additional experience with the new standard. They will be looking for specific changes. So expect your audits under the ISO 9001-2015 to be different. Here are a few important highlights to be ready for. You need to be sure that you defined, monitored, and reviewed, meaning this is not just do it as you have your audit as soon as the ink is dry. You need to show that you've had a cycle of monitoring and reviewing external and internal issues, as well as the interested parties' requirements and information about those interested parties as required by 4.2. You need to demonstrate that you fully implemented the process approach. And you need to be sure that you have determined your risks and opportunities and how you're addressing them. What we recommend is a systematic approach. This should be something that you say, we've done it and we're going to use this process again next year, next cycle, and here's how we're going to improve upon it as we go through evaluating our risks and opportunities, determining as new ones have come out and how those risks and opportunities have changed. Be ready to demonstrate how you have taken actions to address your risk and opportunities. So it's not enough to just determine those risks. You need to be able to explain that. This is something that's not about training. It's about talking as a team. How do we address risks and opportunities and demonstrate what you've done? You're obviously doing some of that, a lot of that already. People just need to be able to understand how it permeates the business. Be able to understand how your objectives and the plans flow across all functions, levels, and processes. Be sure you understand the expanded requirements for resources, for awareness, and for communication. And be sure you understand the greater emphasis on performance, evaluation, and improvement. They've broken a lot of what was in Clause 8 into 2 clauses, 9 and 10. They mean it. This is important. We told you this was a performance-based system, not a product-based or process-based standard. It's based on building the performance of the business. ISO 9001-2015 has implications for auditors. The standard ISO 19011 has always said that auditors need to have specific skills in planning and interviewing and analyzing and reporting. They need to operate ethically and be able to perform a good audit because of their personal characteristics and their ability to deal with people. But ISO 9001-2015 is putting increased demands on auditors for planning and interviewing and analyzing data and evaluating information. That means that your internal auditors need to upgrade those skills in parallel with what the industry is doing in the certification process. So DSERA offers, you can find these on our website, DSERAgroup.com, under the training tab. We offer internal auditor training. We offer implementation training. We do those in Dallas. We can do those at your facility. We can also do them in a virtual instructor-led format. We do a gap assessment workshop that's customized to your needs. Maybe you're just looking at gaps associated with how you've integrated a business you've acquired into yours. Our internal audit workshop, as I mentioned, is kind of an on-the-job training activity where we do some classroom time and then we go out and take it on the road and we say, let's do some audits and look at the results and evaluate what you've learned and did you really develop new competency. I told you we've done this key concept series. We can do that as a private offering over the web for you with a live instructor where you can ask questions and we can talk about how, well, the live instructor would probably be me or my partner, Joe Barquette, who's done a lot of these in the past, where we can talk about specifically how it applies to your organization. And then we can support you in your internal audits and your management review, facilitating those meetings. Here's some of the key concept series we've presented in the past. They're available on our website upon request. You have to notify me if you want those. We only put them up for 2 weeks at a time. We rotate them through. And then we've also given a webinar on 6 steps to ISO 9001 2015 transition, which is available in the sidebar of our website. You can download that at any time and listen to it. And I can also come in and do that for your organization as you get ready to transition. Now that's all I had in the prepared marks. We're right at the 1 hour mark. So I'd like to thank you for participating in the webinar today. And I hope you'll stay in touch and let me know if I can answer any questions for you or be of any service to you as you go through transition with ISO 9001 2015. Thanks for joining us today.